Hey guys, Janine here. Well, those pretty princesses are about to hit our screen again. To celebrate the release of Frozen 2 this month, I decided to create this Frozen 2 cake featuring Anna and a personalised topper. I think Anna got a little bit of a bum steer last time. Everything was all about Elsa. Well, I decided to turn it around and make this one about the little sister. So if you're looking for a cake for an OG Frozen fan that's about to freak out about the latest installment, or for one of the new generation that's going to find out what the hype's about, this cake's for you. Now I wanted to make this cake just as pretty on the inside as it is on the outside. And in order to do that, what I did was I created 5 different coloured batters that I baked all together to make this glorious rainbow cake. First thing I have to do is to split this cake and to fill it with some delicious buttercream. Righto, now that I've split and filled my cake, I've popped it aside in the fridge to chill just for a little moment, and I'm going to bring it back and give it a dirty ice or a crumb coat or a rough ganache coat, depending on where you're from. Okay, now that my cake is dirty iced and all chilled, I know it doesn't look overly pretty right now, but it will. Well, besides the gorgeous blue ganache that I've used because I'm carrying on the theme on the inside. Now I'm ready to go on and do my good ganache coat. Also, I'm going to be using a cake board just to be sure that I get nice straight sides on this very tall cake. Now on tall cakes, you really need to make sure that your sides are nice and straight and even, and that your top is nice and level. It really stands out on taller cakes if these things aren't done right. Alright, now I've got the good coat of ganache on my cake. I'm setting that aside to set up to get nice and firm so it's much easier to decorate when it comes to it. Now I've got a few ahead of time bits and pieces to do. So the first thing I have to do is to cover our board so that it's nice and firm by the time we transfer our cake to it. I cover the board by just rolling out a piece of thin fondant, and then I attach it using a bit of piping gel. Now the other thing I have to do ahead of time is one of our decorative elements, and that's part of the topper. For the topper of this cake, I'm using a small cake board the same size as our cake. So if you're using an 8-inch cake, make it an 8-inch board, but in this case, I'm using a 6-inch. What we need to do is to cut a small section off the bottom of that cake board and then cover that board just as I covered the base board for the cake. Now that the backboard and the top board are covered, I've set them aside to dry for later on. The next part of making this cake is probably the most time-consuming and tricky part to do. It is the part where we have to hand paint Anna, which is our centerpiece. Now don't panic if you're not a budding Van Gogh, I know I'm certainly not. I've cheated a little bit by using an app called the Camera Lucida app. The Camera Lucida app is like a projector for your phone. You choose the image that you want and you project that image onto the surface that you want to draw that image onto. Now once you get over the depth perception part, it's actually quite simple. So what I'm doing is rolling out a thin piece of white fondant that I've measured against the cake to make sure it's about the same height as the cake. And then I'm using my Camera Lucida app to transfer the picture of Anna onto that fondant. I'm using a graphite pencil to trace around the image. Once I've traced the image, I'm then going to go ahead and colour her in just using the picture that I've got as reference, and I'm going to use a mixture of petal dusts, gel colours and food markers. Now, I haven't seen the new Frozen movie, and most people haven't because as I'm filming this, it hasn't been released yet. But what I'm getting from the movie shots is that it's a lot more autumnal rather than winter based. So whilst I will be adding a few snow frozen-y elements, I'm going to make some autumn leaves to pop on this cake, just to reflect the new movie. To make the leaves, I'm going to roll out some autumn coloured fondant, so I'm using a golden yellow and sort of a browny orange, and they're very muted colours. And I'm going to roll them out very thinly, cut them out with my leaf cutter, and then I'm going to put them into a leaf veiner, vein them and pop them aside to dry. Now once they're dried out a little bit, I'm going to come back in and spruce them up a little bit by adding some coloured dusts just to give them more of a rich autumn colour. The other thing I'm going to add just for a little bit of oomph are some branches, and these are really simple. I've just used some brown florist wire and just randomly taped them together with a little bit of brown florist tape. Okay, so I've already gone ahead and covered my cake. Just to save us a little bit of time, if you want to know how I cover my tall cakes in one piece, just hit the I button above and it'll take you to a video that shows you how I do that. Of course, the other thing you could do is panel the cake, which means just covering a bit of fondant on the top and then wrapping the rest of the cake in fondant. The next thing I have to do is airbrush this cake, and I'm going to airbrush the backboard also. I'm just going to use some very watered down colours and build up the colours from the bottom. We're going to go from orange to pink to purple to blue. Now if you don't have an airbrush, don't worry. You've got a couple of options. You can either dust it with some petal dust to get the colours that you like, or failing that, you could always just cover it in a single colour of fondant. You could go with a blue or a purple, whatever suits. Okay, now it's on to the fun parts. I have to do a few more little embellishments before we put this cake together. The first thing I'm going to do is do some lettering for the backboard. Of course, you can change this up to however you wish. I'm making this cake for my little granddaughter, so I'm just putting her name on it because it's for no particular occasion. But don't forget, you can do a happy birthday or whatever message you wish. To do this, I'm just taking some fondant, rolling it out reasonably thinly, and then I'm taking some letter cutters, cutting out my message. I'm going to make them a bit sparkly, and then I'm going to attach them to the backboard using some piping gel. The other thing I want to do is make some snowflakes. Now I know that Frozen 2 seems a little bit more autumn themed, but I saw some snow-capped mountains in some of those trailers. So to make these snowflakes, I'm doing exactly the same thing as I'm doing with the letters. I'm rolling out some white fondant, and then I'm just using a snowflake cutter. I'm going to pop out some snowflakes, make them a bit sparkly, and then they'll be ready to go onto the cake and the backboard. Okay, are you still with me? Good. I know that there's quite a lot of steps, but they're reasonably simple, so I know you'll be able to pull this together. Talking about pulling it together, it's time to put the cake together. So the first step is taking the cake off the setup board and popping it onto the presentation board. I'm just going to add a little bit of chocolate ganache onto that board and pop the cake on top of that to secure it. The next thing I have to do is it's finally time to put Anna on the front of the cake. So pick where you want to put her and pop a little bit of piping gel on the front of that cake. You could use melted chocolate if you wanted to, and press her gently in position on the face of the cake. Then I'm going to go ahead and place the branches where I want them to go. Now this next step is completely optional. You could leave Anna just as she is, but I'm going to go in and I'm going to make her hair 3D. I'm going to do this by adding some Albany red coloured fondant around her face, just going with the flow of where her hair sits. Then I'm going to take my Dresden tool and I'm going to make marks in that fondant to make it look a little more hair-like. I'm also going to add a couple of little more embellishments on her, just her little buttons on her cloak and some little pointed parts on her shoulder. Alright, so close to the finish line now. Now we're just going to add the little bits and pieces. So the first thing I'm going to do is add the leaves. I'm going to add some to the branches, some to the cake. I'm attaching the leaves with some brown royal icing. I've chosen royal icing because it's a lot stronger, so it will help the leaves adhere to those branches a lot easier. And then the next thing I'm going to do is just to start sporadically putting a few of those little snowflakes around also. I'm attaching the snowflakes just with some piping gel. Okay, we're on the home stretch. Now, if you wanted to leave it like this, it already looks glorious, so you could just leave it as it is. But now I'm going to attach my topper. To attach the backboard topper, I'm just going to put some popsicle sticks on the back of the topper using some hot glue. Then I'm going to pop it into a styrofoam dummy and just put some ribbon across the top of it using a glue stick. After that, I will attach it to the top of the cake. So there it is, veering away from the frozen cakes of old. It's my Frozen 2 Anna cake. If you like this video, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up. And if you haven't already, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and hit that notification bell in the bottom so that you're informed every time I upload new content. Don't forget, you can also watch my other videos here. Thank you so much for watching again this week, and I will see you next time. But in the meantime, you know what to do. Go and get your cake on. Bye.